I was refilling my coffee at the hotel breakfast buffet when I saw my husband across the lobby. He was supposed to be in Cincinnati. He had his hand on the back of a woman I had never seen before. Not on her shoulder, not her arm, the small of her back. The way you touch someone you know. She was laughing at something he said, her head tilted toward him, silver earrings catching the light. She looked to be in her mid-60s, maybe older. Elegant. The kind of woman who has had the same haircut for 30 years because it still works. I stood there with a coffee cup in my hand and watched my husband guide this woman toward the elevator like he had done it 100 times before. My name is Mira. I'm 31. My husband and I had been together for 6 years, married for 2. I was in Indianapolis for a client workshop. I do UX design for a healthcare software company. The kind of job that sounds boring at dinner parties but pays well enough that we could afford the apartment we have, the one he picked out, the one with the exposed brick he loved so much. He traveled constantly. Product launches, investor meetings, quarterly reviews. I had stopped asking for specifics a long time ago. Not because I didn't care, but because the answers were always the same and I had work of my own to think about. Cincinnati, he had said. 3 days. Back Thursday. It was Tuesday. I set my coffee down on the nearest table without drinking it. I walked to the elevator bank and pressed the button. When the doors opened, they were not inside. They had taken a different car. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wallpaper pattern until it stopped making sense. Then, I picked up my phone and called him. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I texted, "Hey, just checking in." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. I spent the rest of the morning in my client workshop, nodding in the right places, asking questions I already knew the answers to. At lunch, I excused myself and walked 3 blocks in the wrong direction before I realized I had no idea where I was going. When I got back to the hotel that evening, I asked the front desk, as casually as I could manage, whether a couple had checked in. I gave my husband's description. The woman at the desk apologized and said she couldn't share guest information. I thanked her and went upstairs. I called him again. This time he answered on the second ring. "Hey, sorry, crazy day. How's the workshop?" His voice was the same voice. That was the part I kept coming back to later. The same voice he used when he asked if I wanted Thai food or pizza. The same voice he used when he asked if I wanted Thai food or pizza. The same voice. "It's good," I said. "How's Cincinnati?" "Cold," he said. "Rained all morning." I looked out my window at the Indianapolis skyline. Clear sky, sunset turning everything orange. "I miss you," I said. "Miss you too. I'll be home Thursday. Get some sleep." He hung up first. I sat with my phone in my lap for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and looked up the hotel I was staying in. I searched the name of the woman I had seen. I didn't have a name. I had silver earrings and a green coat, and the way my husband had touched her back like she was something he was trying not to drop. I didn't sleep. By morning, I had made a decision. I rescheduled my afternoon sessions, told my client there was a family situation, and I was sorry. I moved to a different floor of the hotel and paid for 1 more night in cash at the front desk, which felt ridiculous and also exactly right. I watched the lobby from a chair behind a column with a book I was not reading. At 11:15, they walked through together. She was wearing a different coat, charcoal gray, with a scarf in a color I don't have a word for. He was in the navy blazer I had ironed for him the week before. They were not holding hands. They were walking the way people walk when they have been in the same space long enough that they no longer have to perform closeness for anyone. They got into a cab. I got into the next one and gave the driver $50 to follow them, which is something I have only ever seen in movies and which I am now telling you works exactly the same way in real life. The cab stopped in front of a restaurant on the north side. Old brick building, small sign, the kind of place that doesn't need to advertise. I paid my driver and waited 5 minutes. Then I went in. The host asked if I had a reservation. I said I was meeting someone. He led me toward the back, and I saw them before they saw me. A corner booth, menus already open, her reading glasses on the end of her nose. I walked to their table. My husband looked up, and the color left his face so completely and so fast that I almost felt sorry for him. "What a coincidence," I said. I looked at the woman. "I don't think we've met. I'm his wife." She took her glasses off slowly and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Not guilt. Something more complicated. I know who you are, she said. Then you have the advantage, I said. I don't know you at all. My husband stood up. Mira. Sit down, I said. Please. He sat down. I pulled a chair from the next table and sat at the end of their booth like I had been invited. A server appeared and I ordered water and the soup of the day. The woman across from me, I still did not know her name, folded her hands on the table and studied me. I told him this would happen, she said, to no one in particular. What would happen, I asked. She looked at my husband. He was staring at the tablecloth. He's been avoiding this conversation for 8 months, she said. She said it the way someone says something they have said many times before, in their head, on the way to sleep. I told him that was a mistake. 8 months, I repeated. I think you should tell her, she said to him. I think you should tell her right now, while I'm here, so you can't change the story later. He finally looked up. His eyes were red at the edges. He said my name in a way that usually meant he was about to ask me to be patient with him. Not yet, I said. I want to know who she is first. The woman looked at me. My name is Claudette. I'm 64 years old. I am not sleeping with your husband. I waited. I'm his mother, she said. The soup arrived. I picked up my spoon and put it back down. You told me your mother was dead, I said. He didn't answer. You told me she died when you were 12, I said. A car accident. You told me that on our 3rd date. I remember because I cried. I actually cried. I know, he said. Why would you? I stopped. Started again. Why would anyone lie about that? Claudette unfolded her napkin and set it on her lap like we were about to have a perfectly ordinary meal. Because he was ashamed of me, she said, and because his father told him to. I did not go back to the workshop the next day. I called my manager and said I had a family emergency, which was technically true. My husband and I sat in my hotel room until 2 in the morning while he told me the actual story of his life, which was not the story I had been living inside for 6 years. His parents had divorced when he was 8. His father had remarried quickly, a woman from his office, and had decided, for reasons that were never fully explained to me, and possibly never fully explained to my husband either, that Claudette was a problem to be managed. She had struggled with depression for years. There had been a hospitalization when my husband was 10. His father had used that as evidence of instability, had won primary custody, and had spent the following decade systematically constructing a version of events in which Claudette was an absence, a failure, eventually a fiction. He told you to say she was dead, I said. He said it was easier, he said. He said it would just raise questions, and she wasn't able to be consistent back then. She wasn't well. And now, she's been well for 15 years, he said. He looked at his hands. She found me when I was 26, after my dad died. That was 4 years before we met, I said. He nodded. So for the entire time I've known you, I said, she has been alive, and you have known her, and you told me she was dead. He nodded again. And the trips to Cincinnati. Indianapolis, he said quietly. She lives here, has for 10 years. I thought about all the times I had asked about his family, and he had said there wasn't much to tell. I thought about our wedding, where his side of the aisle had been sparse, where he had explained it away by saying his family was small and they weren't close. Claudette had been 20 minutes away and had not been invited to her own son's wedding because I had been told she did not exist. She knows about me? I asked. She knows everything about you, he said. I talked about you. A lot. She has a photo of us, from our engagement. I want to meet her, I said. Properly. Not like tonight, Mira, I said. Properly. Not like tonight, Mira. I am not negotiating this, I said. You lied to me about something enormous for years, and I don't know yet what I'm going to do about that. But I am going to sit across from your mother and have a real conversation with her, and you are going to be there, and none of us are going to pretend that any of this is normal. He agreed. He didn't have much choice. We met Claudette for breakfast the next morning at a diner near her apartment. She was already there when we arrived, coffee in front of her, reading a paperback with a cracked spine. She was someone who had clearly been through things and had decided at some point to stop apologizing for it. She told me her version without being asked. She had been sick, genuinely sick, in the way that brain chemistry can make you sick. And she had not been a consistent mother during those years. And she did not excuse that. She had called too rarely and canceled too often, and missed school plays, and had once shown up to a parent-teacher conference in a state she was not proud of. but she had also never stopped trying to get better, and she had gotten better. And by the time she was well enough to fight for her son, his father had made sure there was nothing left to fight for. I wrote to him, she said. Every year, on his birthday. His father intercepted the letters. He told me, eventually, that they had been returned unread. He found out later that wasn't true. I looked at my husband. He was looking at his coffee cup. You knew he intercepted them? I asked him. I found out 2 years ago, he said. When I was going through my dad's things after he died, there was a box of letters you never read. I've read them now, he said. Claudette put her hand flat on the table. Not reaching for anyone, just present. I'm not here to make him the villain, she said to me. He was a child who was given a story and told to believe it. I'm more angry at the man who built the story. She paused. But I told him, when he found me, that if he was going to have me in his life, he had to be honest. With himself and with whoever he chose to be with. He wasn't, I said. No, she said. He wasn't. We sat for a while. The diner filled up around us. Someone's kids argued over a waffle. Why Indianapolis, I asked her. Why did you stay here? I like the winters, she said, which I did not entirely believe but which I appreciated as an answer. On the cab ride back to the hotel, my husband reached for my hand. I let him hold it. But I didn't hold back. I need you to understand something, I said. I don't care that she's alive. I'm not upset that you have a mother. I'm upset because I asked you once. Early on, I asked you what your biggest regret was. Do you remember what you said? I said not learning to cook. He said quietly. You looked me in the eyes, I said, and you told me your biggest regret was not learning to cook, and you had a mother who was alive and who had written you birthday letters for years that you hadn't read yet, and I was sitting right there, and you looked me in the eyes. He had nothing to say to that. There wasn't anything to say. I went home on Friday. He went home on Friday. We rode in separate cars from the airport and didn't discuss it until Saturday morning, when we sat at our kitchen table with coffee and the kind of silence that has weight to it. I want to understand why you didn't tell me, I said. Not the history. I understand the history. I want to understand why, when you married me, when you stood there and said all those things, why you didn't just tell me. I was afraid, he said. Of what? That you'd see me differently. He turned his cup in circles on the table. It's complicated. She was sick. There's a history of it in her family. I was afraid that if you knew, you'd worry. About me. About, eventually, kids. That's something I get to decide, I said. That's not your decision to make for me. I know that. Did you think I was that fragile? That I couldn't handle the truth about where you came from? No, he said. I think I was. I looked at him across the table. This man I had chosen, who had folded his entire history into a neat lie and handed it to me like a gift. I'm not leaving tomorrow, I said. But I'm not okay, and I need you to understand that those are two different things. He nodded. I want you to see someone, I said. A therapist, someone you talked to about why you thought this was something you could build a marriage on top of. Okay, he said. And I want to have dinner with your mother, I said. Here, in our home. I want her to see where we live. He looked up. She's real, I said. She exists. She's going to exist in our life if we have a life still, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. 3 things happened in the weeks after that. The first was that I told my own mother, not because I tell my mother everything, but because she had known my husband for 6 years and had once, early on, said she couldn't quite put her finger on it, but that he kept his cards very close. I had defended him then. I called her and told her what had happened, and she was quiet for a long time, and then she said, I think you already know what you're deciding. I think you're just waiting for yourself to catch up. She was probably right. The second thing was that my husband found a therapist, a man he saw every Thursday, and he started coming home from those sessions, quieter and more careful with his words, which I took as a sign that something was actually happening in that room. The third thing was Claudette. She called me one afternoon when my husband was at work. She said she hoped that was okay, that she had gotten my number from him, that she would understand if I didn't want contact outside the 3 of us together. I told her it was fine. I want to say something, she said, and I don't want you to feel like you have to respond. Okay, I said. I'm sorry, she said. I know the apology isn't mine to give. He's the one who lied to you. But I knew he hadn't told you. He made me promise not to reach out until he was ready, and I kept that promise for 2 years, and I shouldn't have. I should have pushed harder. I should have told him there was no version of this that ended well if he kept building on a lie. I sat with that. I appreciate that, I said. You seem like someone who would have handled it, she said, if he had just told you. I would have, I said. I know, she said. That's what makes it worse. The dinner I had asked for happened 6 weeks later. Claudette drove up on a Saturday. I made the kind of meal I make when I want to show someone that I am paying attention. Not showy, just considered. She brought wine and a small plant in a terracotta pot that I still have on the windowsill above my kitchen sink. We talked for 4 hours. My husband mostly listened. At one point he got up to do the dishes, and Claudette and I sat at the table, and she told me about the letters she had written. Not all of them, but some. The ones from his birthdays. What she had tried to say each year with the distance of a whole year between them. I wrote about whatever I was learning, she said. Year 34 I wrote about bread. I had just learned to make sourdough, and I wrote him 4 pages about starter culture. She smiled at her wine glass. Seemed like important information at the time. Did he read that one? I asked. He says it's his favorite, she said. I looked at him at the sink, his back to us, the sound of running water. I thought about the version of him I had married. The one with no mother, no letters, no sourdough. I thought about what it meant that that version had never existed. That I had loved a story and the actual person had been standing inside it all along. More complicated, more bruised, more real. I was still angry. I want to be clear about that. Being able to have dinner with someone does not mean you're not also still angry. But I was starting to see the shape of the thing, not excuse it. See it. We went to couples therapy in month 2. My husband's therapist had recommended it, and I agreed. The woman we saw had an office with plants everywhere and a clock that ticked loud enough that I found myself timing my own breathing to it in the first session. She asked me what I needed. I said I needed to know whether the person I was sitting next to was capable of telling me the truth when it cost him something. She asked him the same question she asked everyone. She said, what story had he been telling himself? He thought about it for a long time. The clock ticked. That I was protecting everyone, he said finally. My dad, when I was a kid. Claudette, from having to explain herself. Mira, from having to decide whether she could handle it. He stopped. But I think actually I was protecting myself from the moment she found out. And now that the moment has happened? She asked. It was bad, he said. But it wasn't. She didn't leave. And she could have. He looked at me. She could have, he said again, like he was still working out what that meant. I am writing this from our apartment, the one with the exposed brick he picked out. I am sitting at the table where we had the Saturday morning conversation with the heavy silence, and it's late. And the city outside is doing what cities do at this hour, which is mostly just humming. I did not leave. I want to be honest about why. Because I think the easy version is that love is enough, that people deserve second chances, that the heart wants what it wants. The actual reason is more specific than that. I stayed because he got in a cab and drove to Indianapolis every month for 2 years. Not because he was ashamed of her, but because he was trying to figure out how to be her son without knowing how to explain it. He was clumsy and cowardly about it in ways that cost me, genuinely. But the thing underneath the clumsiness was someone trying to love someone he had been told to give up. I stayed because Claudette told me that the year he turned 32, he drove to Indianapolis on her birthday, left flowers on the porch, and drove back to Chicago without knocking because he didn't know yet whether he was allowed to knock. He didn't know if he was allowed to knock. He didn't know if he was allowed. I think about that a lot. He is still in therapy. We are still in therapy. Claudette comes for dinner every few months and stays in the guest room and reads her paperbacks and teaches me things about her son that I never would have known if all of this had stayed buried. I am still angry, some days. It is a quieter anger now, more like scar tissue than an open wound. You know it's there when you press on it, but it doesn't stop you from moving. Last month I asked Claudette about the bread. The sourdough. She wrote the instructions out on a piece of paper, and I have been attempting it every weekend with limited success. She says starter culture takes patience, that you can't rush the part where it becomes what it's supposed to be. She said that about a lot of things. She's usually right. I used to think the hardest part of being lied to was the lie itself, the specific false thing someone looked you in the eyes and said. But sitting here now, I think the hardest part is actually the recalibration. Going back through 6 years of memories and understanding that you were present for all of them, but you were not in possession of all the facts. It's like finding out mid-hike that the map you've been using was printed with one road missing. You still walked the trail. You still got where you were going. But you did it without information you deserved to have. My husband didn't lie because he wanted to hurt me. I know that now in a way I couldn't have known it standing in that hotel lobby watching him guide his mother toward the elevator. He lied because he had been taught, very early, and by someone he trusted completely, that the truth about where he came from was something to manage rather than share. His father built that lesson into him, the way you build a habit, slowly, consistently, until it stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like just the way things were. That doesn't make it okay. I want to be clear about that. Understanding why someone did something is not the same as deciding it was acceptable. Mira, me, in this story, in this life, had a right to know. Not because I would have handled it perfectly. Not because I would have handled it perfectly. Not because I wouldn't have had complicated feelings about it. But because I was the person choosing to build a life with him, and you cannot build anything real on a foundation that's been quietly hollowed out. What I keep coming back to is Claudette. She wrote those letters every year. Birthdays. 12 of them, returned, intercepted, never delivered. And she kept writing anyway, not because she was certain he would read them someday, but because she had decided that her love for her son was not contingent on whether he was allowed to receive it. That is a kind of quiet perseverance I don't have a better word for. It is not dramatic. It didn't make the news. It was just a woman at a table once a year writing to someone she couldn't reach because stopping felt worse than continuing. I think about that when things are hard now. Not the grand gestures, the quiet ones. The ones nobody sees you making. There's something that happens when you choose honesty after years of something else. It's uncomfortable in a very specific way, like a joint that hasn't been moved in a long time, finally being asked to bear weight. My husband flinches sometimes in therapy when a question gets close to something real, not because he's dishonest now, but because the muscle is still learning. That's allowed. Growth isn't linear, and it isn't clean, and it doesn't happen on anyone else's timeline. What I know is this. The people who hurt us are usually carrying something they were never taught to put down. That's not an excuse. It's just a fact that helps me stay in the room when staying in the room is hard. Claudette's sourdough starter sits on my windowsill and it still isn't right yet. And she says that's fine, that some things take longer than you expect to become what they're supposed to be. I'm choosing to believe her.